My guest tonight is Theresa Holleran, and Theresa received her MSW from the University of Utah in 1975, and she's also trained extensively with mentors and teachers all over the world, including Marion Woodman and the Marion Woodman Foundation in Canada, Switzerland, and the United States. Theresa has taught graduate courses in transpersonal psychology, and eco-psychology, and also process work, and she's co-created national, international retreats and scarce journeys in both urban and wilderness settings on themes of healing and transformation, suffering, wisdom, and resilience, and the scarce inner marriage. So with that said, hello, Theresa.
Hello, Maureen. I'm so happy to be here.
And I am so happy you're here. I've been wanting to do a show of this on this topic, more so because we both have the last names. You guys can figure it out.
So 54 years ago, I remember I was 9 years old, and I was standing at the window waiting for Mom and Dad to come home because I was finally going to have a sister. And I have to say, every single time that I go to visit you or you come to visit me, I have that same feeling of excitement. And now here we are,
So
all these
sweet.
years later, and you're interviewing me on radio, and I couldn't be happier about it. So thank you, sweetie.
Oh, thanks. And you're in addition to us being blood related, you're a wonderful guest. You besides being all over the world, and your journeys, and I know one of the co-hosts, Steve too, have been all over the place, especially the Peru. You love that. But the thing is about I've been wanting to do a show at Union, everything Union. You know how I feel about Carl Jung. But
Yes,
this is what I wanted to say is a lot of people don't know what. I mean, you have a background and you have your own private practice and all that, but the situation about the union of Carl Jung and what he brought together, could you explain to our audience so they know, because some people, wait, what's that noise? Do you hear something?
No,
also.
I hear a phone ringing.
It's like a third person coming back.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just keep going.
Should I wait or try to, okay. Carl Jung, was a colleague and for a while a disciple of Freud. But he had somewhat different ideas than, he really respected Freud. But he also believed that in the unconscious, in the material that is not completely known to us, are our greatest gifts and transformations. And he also really believed that we are essentially spiritual human beings. And so his life work was discovering how we could bring to consciousness our own authentic wholeness. And that included the individuation process of bringing to consciousness the tension of opposites, the masculine and feminine within the psyche, the divine and the human, and all the personal ways we may hold paradox. For example, I'm a person who needs my home, I need to nest, I need structure, I need to have a sense of dailiness that I can count on. But I have this whole other aspect to my nature, which is I need spontaneity and I need adventure, and I often put myself, dangling at the end of a rope on a cliff or wanting to go into a whitewater hole in a kayak, and which brings me so thoroughly into the present moment. I love diverse cultures, and yet, if I don't have that anchor to home in my own community and connection with my family, I also can feel very bereft. And I'm sure that all the listeners can think about the different paradoxes they have within their own nature and how they try to live that. And often what happens as we go through life, we may emphasize certain parts of ourselves and start neglecting others, and then they start showing up as relationship conflicts or body symptoms, or our dreams will start talking to us, or we'll have certain synchronicities in our life that tell us we need to start tending to these other parts of our nature again. So The topic of Jung is really large, but I would really like to talk a little bit about my teacher and mentor as we go through this discussion, who was trained by Carl Jung, and that's Marion Woodman.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we should also start about talking about the sacred intermarriage and about this topic.
How about we start with that and bring the Marion, because it is important. People may not know who she is, but yes. So the sacred marriage, if you could explain, so our listeners can understand, because some people say, well, we're married to somebody else, or so.
Plato, through Aristophanes, had this mythic story where he said there used to be, at the beginning of time, this incredible round being with 2 heads, 4 legs, and 4 arms, signifying wholeness and androgyny. And this being was possessed with such enormous power and creativity and illumination that the gods and goddesses got jealous, and they split this being in half. And ever since, we have been in search of this other half, in search of our own wholeness. And there's a quote from Rumi that says, lovers don't finally meet. They're in each other all along. And to be in this human life, all of us have experiences, many deaths and rebirths, loss, challenges. The life that we had intended to live doesn't turn out the way we thought. And we have an opportunity in those moments to turn our suffering, our losses, our challenges into the gold of transformation. And one of the ways of accomplishing that is through the sacred intermarriage. And the most basic definition of that is that we all have within us, men and women alike, what are called feminine and masculine energies. And this is not about gender. It's not about sexual preference. It's not about gender identity. Some people describe it as yin and yang energies, or lunar and solar, or if you studied Hindu mythology, Shiva and Shakti energies. I'm trying to think, Maureen, what do you think would be the best place to start with this? Should I be defining this, or do you have some questions for me?
Well, no, but the interesting part is that a lot of us don't think, and I follow you in the yin and the yang and anything else you want to call it, but the thing of it is, I feel that it'd be really great to start out with your work with, who is Marion Woodman? Let's go to her.
Okay. Well, Marion Woodman, I first encountered her in the 80s, and she wrote a series of books on how to bring the feminine and masculine principle to consciousness within men and women. And the first book I read was called The Pregnant Virgin, The Process of Psychological Transformation in Women. And I was in my early 30s. I'm now 63. And I thought, what the hell is she talking about? I couldn't understand it through my intellect. But what I noticed is that my dreams started changing. So I knew something very powerful was happening. And she had a severe eating disorder all through her 20s. She was the daughter of a minister. She grew up in Canada. She was not allowed to dance. And one day when she was in Toronto, she tried to hail a cab. I think she was in her early 40s at this time. And she couldn't get a cab to stop for her. And so she heard a voice in her head that said, Marion, if you don't even have enough being in your body to stop a cab, you need to go to India. Now you'd say that's quite a leap to go to India because you can't hail a cab. But she trusted that inner voice, and she took off on a trip around the world, and she ended up in India. And like for many of us, we think that's going to be the experience, but it was actually the beginning of her journey. So she was in India, and while she was there, she got so ill that she almost died. And she was alone in her hotel room. And to try to hold on to herself, she was reading Shakespeare and she was reading the Bible. And she kept reading her passport so she could remember her name. And she got so ill that at one point she floated up above her body and she looked down at herself and she realized, I treat my dog better than I treat my own body. And that was a complete epiphany for her. So when she was finally well enough, she walked into the hotel lobby and she was with her journal and she was sitting down to write to her husband. And she was very frail, felt very introverted. And all of a sudden, this very beautiful, voluptuous, dark-skinned Indian woman came down and sat on the couch next to her. And she said it wasn't a very large couch, but she wanted some space. And the Indian woman sat down right next to her. So she thought, what is going on here? So she scooched over, and the woman scooched over right next to her. So she scooched over again, and the woman scooched right next to her. And she said she had such a confusion in herself because part of her was going, I want my space, stay away from me. And then she realized that this warm, life-giving energy was just pouring into her body after she had been so ill. So this repeated itself for the next 3 days. And finally, on the third day, when she was feeling so much better, this man came up to her and he said, I can see that you are better now, and I no longer need to send my wife to you.
Oh, my gosh.
Said, well, who are you? And he said, I run this hotel, and I saw that you were dying, so I sent my wife to be with you. And she said that was one of her first experiences of feeling the healing power of the feminine. But here's this man, his masculine discernment assessed the situation, and out of enormous kindness and compassion of both these people, his masculine discernment and her feminine related generosity, Marion felt like her life turned towards healing again. So I tell that story as a way maybe now to introduce what I mean about the feminine and the masculine. So the feminine, you know what, Maureen, I think what I want to do first before I define these things is maybe to invite our listeners into a very brief inner work exercise. Would that be okay?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So all the listeners out there, as a way to introduce these concepts, we understand the masculine and feminine energies by how we know men and how we know women. Our first experience with our fathers, our first experience with our mothers, our friends, our siblings, and also through popular culture. You know, like there was a period of time when you could say Laurence Olivier maybe was the epitome of positive masculine or the great lover. Now somebody may say George Clooney. Now, I'm dating myself because I'm in my 60s. And Maureen, who would you say would be the epitome of positive masculine in pop culture?
Well, you know, I like the underdog, Robert Downey Jr. I just like the underdog.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Definitely Robert Downey Jr. And he plays this mythic heroic figure, too, in the Iron Man series. So what I want to invite our listeners to do is, whether you're a man or a woman, and Maureen, you can do this, and also your co-leaders also, I want you to imagine a woman that you're very drawn to, whether you're a man or a woman. And this woman might be somebody that delights you or that you're envious of, or even who might irritate you. But it's a woman that you have some energy towards. And she might be somebody you know, and she might be somebody that you've read about, or she might even be a TV or a movie character, or maybe a political figure. It doesn't matter. And just trust your first instinct.
Okay.
And then once you imagine that woman, and she comes to mind, and some people are very visual and some people will have more of a kinesthetic feeling about this. So I really want you to study this woman. How does she move? How does she speak? How does she dress? Is there a scene that you see her in? How do you relate to her? So just notice all of that. Really
Okay.
study her and feel into her. And now imagine for a brief moment, you know, in our human imagination is a great thing. Imagine that you are this woman. How are you in the world? How do you speak? How do you relate? How do you move? Just notice all that.
I like this. Okay, I got it.
And then ask yourself, where in my life do I need this energy? And now, to give you an example of that, the woman who comes to mind for me, and it's very poignant right now because this woman has recently died, is Maya Angelou. And the first time I experienced Maya Angelou, I was in my 20s, and I was in graduate school, and I heard that this poet was coming in to speak in the Art and Architecture building. And at that time, this is about 40 years ago, I did not know who she was. And I walked into the auditorium, and there was this Amazonian African-American woman with a headdress and beautiful colored like a bikini on. And I was struck by her. But if I imagine now being Maya Angelou, I imagine that I am really at home in my body. I imagine that I move with grace and sensuality, and I also imagine that I can speak my truth. And as I'm saying that, because the listeners cannot see me, I imagine moving my right hand in a very up and down discerning movement as my feet are planted firmly on the earth. And so I feel like a woman who's strong and whole and very sensuous. And I remember reading, you know, that she even kicked somebody out of her dining room because she didn't like how they were gossiping about somebody. So I need her in many places in my life. So Maureen, who came to mind for you?
Somebody that I know, I've never met on a physical, but we're very close. Do I need to say her name? She's a woman that's helping me right now, and I've become very close to her, more than just helping me in my work, but helping me be close and trust again.
Uh-huh. And if you imagine now where you need her qualities, I mean, so these are qualities of she's trustworthy, she's related.
Yeah, yes, and it's a hard thing sometimes when we can't trust, especially in in the female. When I'm thinking about in females, right?
Yes.
And I have doubt sometimes that it's in my own thought head form, and by opening up to her more about all maybe the darker parts of myself, she has no problem with who I am. I feel accepted. And,
wow. Oh, this woman sounds lovely. So you're actually illuminating, and I wish I could ask more of our listeners who came to mind for them, but you're illuminating some of the definition of what the feminine principle is.
Okay.
And these words, feminine and masculine, are actually archetypes. And you can think of an archetype as the DNA is to the body, archetypes are to the psyche. And archetypes maybe are like a magnet underneath a piece of paper, and then all the images, energies, if you imagine the magnet pulls them into a coherent structure. So the feminine principle prefers process to product, meandering and enjoying the pleasure of the journey. It's a presence in the body. It's feeling the connection among things rather than the separateness. The feminine really receives who another person is and can receive the cry of the planet to the cry of the soul. The nature of the feminine is to recognize, experience, receive, and nurture the whole. And one of the most amazing things about the feminine, and I mentioned this when we first started talking, is the capacity to hold paradox. So when I listen to you talk about this woman, you feel like she really understands you, like she can really relate to you in a deep way. And, you know, Maureen, and I also experienced that in you as my sister and with the counsel that you've given me. I feel like you really see into me and really support me, like in the places where I'm still at 63 years old, scared and lost, and also you see the wisdom that has been growing in me because of everything that I've been through in life. And I hope I mirror that to you, too.
Yes, you are.
So now the masculine, before I define what that is, I like, if you're a man or a woman, and Maureen, you actually did this very spontaneously with Robert Downey Jr., so to picture a man that you're drawn to, maybe somebody you know, maybe a mythic figure, maybe a character, a play, a movie, a book.
Okay.
It might be somebody you're envious of, but really study that man. Study him in the scene he's in. Study how he relates, how he speaks. And then imagine that you are this man in the world, relating, making decisions. And really feel into what that's like. And then ask yourself, where do I need this energy?
Okay.
And Maureen, do you want to say anything? Maybe Robert Downey Jr. again? It might be somebody else.
Well, yeah, but no, but then I decided I went towards Eckhart Tolle.
Eckhart Tolle. Okay, speak about him.
Well,
what do you experience when you're him?
Peace. I experience peace and gentleness.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing with Eckhart Tolle. By the way, I have a really funny statement that I heard from Eckhart Tolle. He said, I heard him say recently that most of us are only present enough to not bump into furniture. And I think what this sacred inner-marriage work is about becoming more present to just what is in the moment. Of course, he's famous for that, right? The power of now and a new earth. And I'm actually going to have the good fortune of going to one of his retreats in Australia in November, so it's interesting you bring him up. But the other thing I want to notice, when I was talking about Maya Angelou, and now you talking about Eckhart Tolle is a man who really has an integrated feminine in him. And Maya Angelou is a woman who has a lot of integrated masculine. So the masculine principle moves towards a goal in a straight line, is quick to act, differentiates the opposites, separates, discriminates, endures, overcomes, strives, creates. And you can see now, if you think about these feminine and masculine energies, they are not either or. We need this ability to hold paradox, and we need the capacity to cut with a clean sword and say, no, this, not that. This is who I am, not that. So the masculine principle allows us to act from that delineation. Now I want to talk about how the masculine and feminine work together. I traveled in Peru in the early 2000s, and I was very fortunate to be in training with the Karo shamans there. and did a couple of treks, the Inca Trail, but also to Mount Falcantay, which is considered the feminine mountain. And one of the things I was learning was about their cosmology. And here's what they say. They say Pachamama, which is such a beautiful word. That is their word for the Earth Mother. Pachamama. She is our mother. And all life flows from her. So there's the feminine principle, which they consider the ground. And then they say the Apu mountain spirits, which are the masculine energy to them, because they rise straight up from the earth. And in gratitude, they melt the waters of their glaciers to feed her nourishment, her flowers and her trees and her lakes and her rivers. And so their understanding of cosmology is that first there's the feminine, the grounded being. We need to know who we are and what we value. And the value is not just emotion, because sometimes emotion can be reactive. But if I know, for example, nobody on this planet would say that we value destroying our water and our air. Everybody would value clean water, clean air, the beauty of our natural habitat. We would value that. But if we're grounded in that value, which is the feminine principle, then we would take action based on that. And that is the masculine. So first we know what we value, who we are, and then take action. What we've done too much of on this planet, and this is both men and women have done this, we operate from what's called a patriarchal principle, which means we act from power rather than value or love. So Marion Woodman says that consciousness is trying to move from power to love. And that's a very important task on our planet right now. So for example, the feminine principle realizes that if the rainforests get cut down in South America, you can't breathe in California and I cannot breathe in Utah. And that is not just a metaphor, that is a reality. And the feminine principle knows that. So then the masculine would move in to protect the source of our clean air, to take action or to make laws or to make sure that we live in harmony with our deepest values. Does that make sense, Maureen?
Well, it makes sense to me because what you're saying is if we're connected with the aspects within ourselves, it doesn't matter what gender, whatever, we're all collectively connected, that we all can make.
Yeah.
Is that what you're,
right.
is that what my understanding is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm saying whether you use the phrase yin and yang or masculine and feminine. Yeah. Now, the reason Marion's life work was about naming these masculine and feminine energies is she said they would show up in our dreams as men and women. So, for example, a few years ago when I was considering doing a training in Switzerland with the Marion Woodman Foundation, and I was trying to figure out if it was right for me, and I frequently go to my dreams, which I feel are truly gifts from the soul. And I had this dream. There's a comatose man lying on the earth whose heart was bleeding. So there you would say, in my dream world is an image of my own wounded masculine. And at that time of my life, I think I'd been through a breakup, I was living kind of frenetically, I was pushing myself too hard, I was being way too busy. And so I have this dream that there's a comatose man lying on the earth whose heart was bleeding. And Marion was to the left of me, and I turned to her and asked her for help. She came over to me, kneeled down next to the wounded man. And I remember this because it just seemed like such a reverent act. He was just lying on the earth. And then she told me to put this beautiful green cloth over his wound. You know, and the green is the color of fertility and life. It's also the color of the heart chakra. So I did that. And then she said to me, his heart is now a drum. And in the dream, I knew that I could play beautiful music with this drum. So I just very gently started beating his chest with the green cloth that had now become a drum, just slowly, steady, mother heartbeat rhythm. And all of a sudden, this man filled with energy and he came back to life. And in the dream, it was like this utter transformation. And then Marion and I and a group of white-haired women, and my hair is beginning to turn white,
It's not.
began dancing and singing around the man who was coming back to life. And then I saw the Swiss Alps in the background. So I knew I was supposed to go and do that retreat. But this dream has what I would call intermarriage material. And how we work on the intermarriage is through our dream images, our relationship conflicts and our body symptoms, and our creativity. So in this dream, there's the wounded masculine that needs the healing, nurturing of the feminine. But what is also significant is the feminine that comes in is also the wise, older feminine. And there are three archetypal energies of the conscious feminine. So is it okay if I talk about those, Maureen, right now?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. You know what? Yes, absolutely. Let's go for that.
Okay. So the three archetypes of the conscious feminine are the mother, the virgin, and the crone. So the mother does not mean necessarily being a literal mother, but it means our relationship to our own bodies. And this is for both men and women. And how we relate to our own bodies is also related to how we treat the body of the earth. So if I really pay attention to my own signals, how much energy do I have today? Am I in pain? Am I hungry? Am I filled with life and I want to dance or sing? My body is my oldest friend, my steadiest companion, and being grounded in the presence and reality of my body in this moment is where I need to be to even begin to understand the conscious feminine. And the metaphor I use sometimes is if we think of a horse, a beautiful horse. I love horses. And the horse has been traveling a great distance, pulling a cart behind it, or some kind of a burden, or maybe a rider. And there's a destination in mind. But the weather has been difficult, some things have happened along the way, and the journey has been taking longer and longer. But still, the driver, the rider on the horse wants to get there at a certain time. And then the horse collapses. The horse needs rest. And the horse needs food.
Theresa, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I need to do a quick commercial from psychicaccess.com.
Okay.
I want to stop at that point so that it would be easy for us to go back. Is that okay? So we'll be right back with Theresa Holleran in a moment after this commercial break.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at psychicaccess.com.
Okay, we're back with Theresa Holleran, and we're talking about a great subject about intermarriage. And we were just talking about, Theresa, I apologize for interrupting. You were talking, can you bring us back into where we were?
Well, we left that horse on the ground. Okay, so
maybe prior to the horse. Maybe
this is how we are. We want to get to our destination. If you imagine the horse is our own body, the horse collapses. The horse needs rest. The horse needs water. And the rider has some choices. You start beating the horse because getting to the destination is the most important thing. And I know even to think about that image makes me sick, and yet I know I've done it to myself. Or do we say, wait a minute, we need to stop and deal with what's happening with this horse right now. And we bring water, and we bring food, and maybe we sit with the horse, and we stroke its flank, and we say, this is good for now. So that would be an example of how to be grounded in the conscious mother. The rhythms of your own body, the rhythms of life, the seasons of life. And then the virgin archetype, we've all heard the idea that a virgin is a woman without a man. That is not the definition of a virgin. The virgin, and now think about this, whether it's a woman or the feminine within a man.
Right.
The virgin is the feminine that's whole, or a woman whole unto herself. She knows who she is. She knows what she values. She's not just about pleasing others or trying to mold herself into someone who might be acceptable or be loved. And that's very rigorous work, to really find out who am I and what do I value. Not the values I inherited, but what do I think, what do I feel. And then the third archetype of the feminine, and this is a lifetime's work, is the crone. Now, many people don't like that word. They think of hag or some grumpy old woman. But the true meaning of the word crone is crown. So it's the crowning of a life. And the crone is the feminine that's been through so many crossroads, so many deaths and rebirths. She's known struggle. She's known loss. And she no longer comes from judgment. She can mirror people. She can see clearly, but she does not judge. She may be fierce. Like Maya Angelou carries that. Where she
I want to be. I like to be a crone hag, whatever you want.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, and it does take a lifetime to grow. It takes going through hell and back. It takes a lot of alchemical work to grow into being a crone. The first crone I ever saw was a man named Dick Olney. He was one of my first teachers in the early 80s, a huge man. He studied Gestalt and bioenergetics, and he was a poet and a philosopher. And I did these 2-week intensives with him in Berkeley on self-acceptance. And there was a Catholic priest in my group, and he was in his 60s, and he had fallen in love with a woman, and he was in anguish because he took his vows very seriously, and yet his heart had completely opened with this woman that he loved. And he was on the ground sobbing, and I saw Dick, this huge man, sit on the ground with him and scooch right next to him and put his big arms around him and just rock this man and hold him as this man wept.
It's lovely.
And that was my first experience of what I would call crone energy.
Right.
As he helped this Catholic priest hold without judgment, hold the paradox of his anguish.
Right.
So, there's so much to be said about all of that. But I also, I know we don't have much time here, and I also want to talk about the archetypes of the positive masculine, which are in both men and women.
Right.
So
that sounds fantastic.
Is that a good place to go to now, Marie?
I feel, because the time we have, so I feel that would be great if we could get that out there. Yes, absolutely.
So there's a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Gillette and Moore. That's their last names. And there's also really great work by a Jungian analyst named Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson is probably in his early 90s now. And he's written books called He, She, and We. So obviously he about the masculine, she about the feminine, and we about the myth of romantic love. And what he means by that is true human love is love that's past the projections we have on one another. And it's this sacred intermarriage work that allows us to see the reality of who the other person is. And again, this could be women who love women, men who love men, men and women, or actually in any relationship that's not even a lover relationship. But I would recommend reading Robert Johnson. I love his work. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, I really like this king, warrior, magician, lover. So the king, as an aspect of the masculine principle, is about order, reasonable and rational patterning, stability and centeredness. And the king looks towards others in their weakness or gifts with a kindly eye. The king has the capacity to promote others. He rewards people. He encourages creativity. Can you imagine having a boss like this? Or a father like this?
Yes,
a teacher
lovely.
Like this?
Yes.
Again, this is in both men and women. So it's people who carry authority, but they don't do it just from the power. They are empowered, but they don't just do it from a power principle. They are really for supporting the best in the other. Trying to think of, again, I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to move through this. The warrior is a total way of life. And one of the masculine figures that I came up with when I did the inner exercise, this is a Hollywood movie that I fell in love with this character. It's The Last Samurai. And it was the character played by Ken Watanabe. He was Hashimoto, I think was his name. Mm-hmm. But he was such a magnificent archetypal warrior because he absolutely knew what he was fighting for. It wasn't about his own ego. It was a transpersonal, something greater than himself. And he was still connected to the feminine values of beauty and relatedness. So it's aggressiveness that arouses and motivates. There's a capacity to leap into battle, a vitality of energy. But it's grounded in clear thinking. And the true warrior has a realistic assessment of his abilities. And that's the difference between warrior energy and a heroic energy. Because sometimes heroes go off pell-mell, fighting the dragon, but they don't really assess what their limitations are. The warrior is concerned with skill and accuracy, not bravado. And the training of the mind and body are essential. So warriors often have a meditation practice. They're able to go within and center themselves. Then the magician is the next aspect of the conscious masculine. And maybe the best way to describe that is, I don't know how many of you saw, it's an old movie now called The Right Stuff. And John Glenn, I think he was played by Ed Harris in the movie. He's circling the globe, and something goes wrong with the ship, and it starts sparking, and it's really terrifying things. And then you cut to these Aboriginal magicians, medicine men in Australia, and they are doing this ritual with fire. So they are sending light and sparks into the cosmos to meet up with the light and sparks that are flashing off the spaceship. And you can see in that image how the magicians are transmuting the terror, something that's going wrong, to this spiritual support. So it's the ritual elder who can guide the process of transformation, who could show up in the darkest times. It's Merlin with King Arthur. The early alchemists were magicians, Magicians are also bullshit detectors. They can stand back and observe. They're thoughtful. They're wise. And they often come in the time of crisis. And then the last archetype I want to make sure and cover is the lover. So the lover, this is not gigolo. It's not somebody who's just seducing a lot of women. The lover energy has such strong positive ego structure that it is the intermediary among all the other archetypes, the king, the warrior, and the magician. The lover energy in the masculine is related, connected, alive, enthusiastic, compassionate, energized. They have a sense of meaning and purpose, and they're interested in the search for meaning and purpose. So that you could say, Maureen, that they keep all the other archetypes attached to life.
Right.
And they're about spontaneity and joy. And the lover longs for a better world for others and ourselves. And you know, it's also the lover that understands the alchemical power of poetry, of a beautiful painting, a symphony, a dance. You know, it's the arts that can shift our consciousness in a flash. You know, we are so fortunate that we have access to the great poets just across the centuries now. You know, that's where our technology has really served us. But I really wanted to give you an overview of how to look at these different archetypes. So do you have any questions for me? Because I'm aware we probably only have about 5 more minutes.
I would like to know is if somebody, listening to this, and I, from where I'm sitting, I feel it's extremely important to be able to take this into consideration. Anybody, there's a lot of things, there's self-help things that do this or that, but for this, because it's union, it makes so much sense because we're collectively connected, all of us, that it would make sense that we would want to pay attention to allowing ourselves to bring the masculine or be mindful or how to integrate, be aware of, integrate, whatever it is, privately, whatever, to bring it together, how it would make such a difference to our relationships, to our world, to ourselves, to our relationships with ourselves.
Absolutely, yes.
So if you would if someone was to say, listen, well, okay, I've heard all this, what you're saying, what would you suggest a person might do to, you named one book, but it was an easy or a friendly, user-friendly type of,
Yeah, I actually would recommend Robert Johnson's He, She, and We.
Okay.
And Marion Woodman has a CD set called Sitting by the Well.
Okay.
That you can get through SoundsTrue.com, which I think would be excellent. And also, she did a TV series on men and women with Robert Bly, the poet.
Oh,
and they worked with a fairy tale called The Maiden King, and there is a book by that name that both Robert Bly and Marion Woodman have written together. Okay. And the other thing I would highly recommend, if you go to the mwoodmanfoundation.org, there's a link there for a film about Marion Woodman's life because there's so much to say about her. She's in her mid-80s right now. She's really a pioneer.
Right.
And it's called Dancing in the Flames. And she does such a good job in that film of talking about how she found her own authentic life. There's a quote by Carl Jung that says, "That which you do not bring to consciousness comes to you as your fate."
Yeah.
That which you do bring to consciousness, whether it was what you thought you wanted, that means your ego wanted, or not, is your destiny. Gandhi's a good example of this, where he,
right.
I don't think he set out to, the nonviolent movement in India, but that became his destiny. So why this is important, I find myself feeling really pissy about the man in my life.
Right.
And I'll say to myself, what is it that the man inside of me needs to do for me? You put on your website that story of, this was about 30 years ago where I fell madly in love with an adventurer. And when we broke up, I was so bereft and angry and critical of him. And then when I had a dream that told me I needed to take my own hand and become an adventurer and not project that onto that particular man.
Right.
And now we are friends to this day because I was able to do that work.
And you've sure been going to a lot of great, cool adventure places, I must say.
That's right. Yeah. Teresa, there's so much more to say, but I think we're done, aren't we?
Well, yes, and I do want to I would like to tell, and I really appreciate you, as my sister dearly, and not only that, as who you are and what you reflect. You and I are colliding our worlds now too, just like Mariah's in the chat room. Yeah. Mariah's in the chat room, by the way, Theresa. She's been here the whole time listening to the show, and that's my daughter, everybody. And she's at Columbia, and she's colliding now also. But I would like to tell everybody, and on your guest page you can find that. But Theresa's website is mountainlotuscounseling.com. So if anybody wanted to contact you or find out what's going on in your upcoming schedule, they can find that out. It's a beautiful new website. So please do so. And Theresa, thank you so much. Thank you so much for.
Thank you. I love it. I just have to say hi to Mariah.
Yeah, she said hi to you.
I love it that she's in the chat room. And I wish I could have seen and met every single one of you. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Theresa, so much. And have a great evening. Get some good rest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good night.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers, get access, psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.
What's that noise? Do you hear something?
No,
also.
I hear a phone ringing.
It's like a third person coming back.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just keep going.
Should I wait or try to? Okay. Carl Jung was a colleague and for a while a disciple of Freud, but he had somewhat different ideas than he really respected Freud. But he also believed that in the unconscious, in the material that is not completely known to us, are our greatest gifts and transformations. And he also really believed that we are essentially spiritual human beings. And so his life work was discovering how we could bring to consciousness our own authentic wholeness. And that included the individuation process of bringing to consciousness the tension of opposites, the masculine and feminine within the psyche, the divine and the human, and all the personal ways we may hold paradox. For example, I'm a person who needs...
My guest tonight is Theresa Holleran. And Theresa received her MSW from the University of Utah in 1975. And she's also trained extensively with mentors and teachers all over the world, including Marion Woodman and the Marion Woodman Foundation in Canada, Switzerland, and the United States. Theresa has taught graduate courses in transpersonal psychology, and eco-psychology, and also process work, and she's co-created national, international retreats and scarce journeys in both urban and wilderness settings on themes of healing and transformation, suffering, wisdom, and resilience, and the scarce inner marriage. So with that said, hello, Theresa.
Hello, Maureen. I'm so happy to be here.
And I am so happy you're here. I've been wanting to do a show of this on this topic, more so because we both have the last names. You guys can figure it out.
So 54 years ago, I remember I was 9 years old, and I was standing at the window. My teacher and mentor, as we go through this discussion, who was trained by Carl Jung, and that's Marion Woodman.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we should also start about talking about the sacred intermarriage and about this topic.
How about we start with that and bring the Marian, because it is important. People may not know who she is, but yes. So the sacred marriage, if you could explain, so our listeners can understand, because some people say, well, we're married to somebody else, or so.
Plato, through Aristophanes, had this mythic story where he said there used to be, at the beginning of time, this incredible round being with 2 heads, 4 legs, and 4 arms, signifying wholeness and androgyny. And this being was possessed with such enormous power and creativity and illumination that the gods and goddesses got jealous, and they split this being in half. And ever since, we have been in search of this dough, waiting for Mom and Dad to come home, because I was finally going to have a sister. And I have to say, every single time that I go to visit you or you come to visit me, I have that same feeling of excitement. And now here we are,
So
all these
sweet.
years later, and you're interviewing me on radio, and I couldn't be happier about it. So thank you, sweetie.
Oh, thanks. And you're in addition to us being blood related, you're you're a wonderful guest. You besides being all over the world, and your journeys, and I know one of the co-hosts, Steve too, have been all over the place, especially the Peru. You love that. But the thing is about I've been wanting to do a show at Union, everything Union. You know how I feel about Carl Jung. But this is what I wanted to say is a lot of people don't know what. I mean, you have a background and you have your own private practice and all that, but the situation about the union of Carl Jung and what he brought together, could you explain to our audience so they know, because some people,
My home, I need to nest, I need structure, I need to have a sense of dailiness that I can count on. But I have this whole other aspect to my nature, which is I need spontaneity and I need adventure. And I often put myself, dangling at the end of a rope on a cliff, or wanting to go into a whitewater hole in a kayak, and which brings me so thoroughly into the present moment. I love diverse cultures, and yet, if I don't have that anchor to home in my own community and connection with my family, I also can feel very bereft. And I'm sure that all the listeners can think about the different paradoxes they have within their own nature and how they try to live that. And often what happens as we go through life, we may emphasize certain parts of ourselves and start neglecting others, and then they start showing up as relationship conflicts or body symptoms, or our dreams will start talking to us, or we'll have certain synchronicities in our life that tell us we need to start tending to these other parts of our nature again. So, the topic of Jung is really large, but I would really like to talk a little bit about